Imagine a quiet afternoon in Clearwater, Florida. Cars sit in a small convenience store parking lot. A heated argument flares over a single parking space, a space reserved for someone with a disability. What starts as words quickly becomes a shove, then a gunshot. A life ends. And a community asks, how did this happen, and could it have been prevented? This is the story of Michael Drejka and Markeis McGlockton, a case that ignited debate over self-defense laws, racial tensions, and responsibility in moments of crisis. It was July 19, 2018. Outside the Circle A food store, a woman named Brittany Jacobs was sitting in a car parked in a handicapped accessible space when a man, later identified as Michael Drejka, approached and began shouting at her about the parking. Markeis McGlockton, Jacobs' boyfriend, was inside the store with the couple's young son. When McGlockton emerged, a confrontation escalated. He pushed Drejka to the ground. Seconds later, Drejka drew a pistol and fired once, striking McGlockton. The young father stumbled back into the store and later died. What anyone watching the grainy surveillance footage notices immediately is how ordinary the setting looks. A strip of asphalt, parked cars, the entrance to a store, and yet in less than a minute, ordinary becomes fatal. The camera captures the shove, the fall, the retreat, and then a single muzzle flash. To many who saw that footage, the most striking detail was this. After being shoved, McGlockton appears to pull away. He does not advance toward Drejka in a way that suggests imminent lethal threat. That image would become central to arguments about who was the aggressor and whether deadly force was ever justified. At first, law enforcement did not arrest Drejka Pinellas. County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri said Drejka had invoked Florida's stand your ground law, and investigators believed Drejka claimed he feared further attack after being slammed to the pavement. The sheriff explained that a forceful shove could reasonably make someone fear for their life. The decision not to arrest sparked protests in an outcry from the victim's family and from civil rights advocates who saw echoes of other high-profile shootings. But the story did not end there. The case was taken up by the state attorney's office after public pressure and further review. In August 2018, prosecutors formally charged Michael Drejka with manslaughter. Video evidence, witness statements, and a re-examination of the timeline would be presented to a jury. The legal question boiled down to whether Drejka had a reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm. The legal threshold in Florida for using deadly force without a duty to retreat, or whether he had created the dangerous situation and responded with disproportionate violence. Let's step through what the prosecution said. Witnesses described McGlockton shoving Drejka from behind. Some saw Drejka reach toward a gun as if to flash it, perhaps to intimidate, then fire. Several witnesses later told investigators they thought Drejka at first intended only to scare McGlockton. Prosecutors argued Drejka had escalated a non-deadly confrontation into a deadly one by drawing and firing while the other man was backing away. They emphasized the presence of McGlockton's 5-year-old son nearby, the context of a parking dispute, and Drejka's past confrontations in similar situations. The defense told a different story. Drejka claimed he felt threatened after being violently shoved. He had a concealed carry permit and told investigators he feared being attacked again under Florida law. A person who reasonably believes deadly force is necessary may stand their ground and need not retreat. The defense argued that a forceful shove could amount to a threat of continuing violence, giving Drejka the right to defend himself. The central question for jurors became this: would a reasonable person in Drejka's position have believed they were facing imminent death or serious injury? In August 2019, the case went to trial. Prosecutors played slow-motion clips of the surveillance footage for the jury, breaking the sequence into the decisive seconds: the push, the fall, the withdrawal. They asked jurors to imagine preventing a tragedy, to consider whether a man who had been shoved could have simply retreated, sought help from bystanders, or called police, rather than pull out a firearm and shoot. Jurors deliberated, and after about 6 hours they reached a verdict: guilty of manslaughter. The jury had concluded that Drejka's use of deadly force was not legally justified. On October 10, 2019, the judge sentenced Michael Drejka to 20 years in prison. In handing down the sentence, the judge noted that with the right to carry a weapon come profound responsibilities, that the law does not give license to escalate confrontations to lethal outcomes. For the McGlockton family, the conviction and sentence were a measure of accountability, though not enough to bring Markeis back. For many observers, the case became a modern parable about guns, anger, and how a split-second decision can destroy lives. But the legal outcome was only one chapter. The Drejka case reopened national conversations about Florida's self-defense laws and how they are applied. Critics argued the initial decision not to arrest, and the very existence of broad, stand-your-ground protections, can sometimes shield shooters from immediate accountability. Supporters of the law said it protects people who face sudden and violent threats. Legal scholars pointed out that cases rarely turn on the statute's broad language alone. Instead, they hinge on the messy, human facts in front of juries. Who pushed whom? Who retreated? The distance between individuals, prior conduct, and the precise timing of perceived threats. Beyond legal jargon, remember the people at the heart of this tragedy. Markeis McGlockton was a 28-year-old father. Photos show a man who left behind family and young children. His girlfriend, Brittany Jacobs, who had been sitting in the car when Drejka confronted her, would later speak about the chaos and disbelief that followed the shooting. And on the other side, friends and family of Drejka painted him as a man who felt threatened and acted on impulse. In the end, both families were broken, and a community was left asking what could have prevented this from happening at all. So what are the lessons? First, escalation is deadly. Heated language can spiral in seconds. A single shove can become a life-ending gunshot. Second, responsibility matters. Owning a weapon legally carries the obligation to use it only when truly necessary. Third, laws that govern self-defense hinge on reasonableness, and reasonableness is judged after the fact, often imperfectly. And finally, surveillance video, witness testimony, and public pressure can change the course of justice, sometimes preventing cases from being closed prematurely and ensuring they see a jury. This case will be remembered not just for the verdict or the sentence, but for the deeper questions it raised. How do we measure fear? When is shooting an act of self-defense, and when is it an act of needless violence? How do communities rebuild after such an explosive moment? As you watch the footage and read the reports, try to picture the timeline again. The argument, the shove, the retreat, the gunshot. Think of the small decisions each person could have made differently. If someone had walked away, asked a store clerk to intervene, or called authorities, a young father might still be alive. That is the human cost behind every legal line in the law books. This was not just a case about a parking space. It was about choices. Split-second choices that reverberate forever.